The first hammer fell against the gate at 7 minutes past 8, just as Eleanor Vale finished adding the last column of figures that proved her family did not owe what Sir Oswald Crewe claimed. The sound shook frost from the iron bars. Her youngest sister started in the passage. Somewhere above a drawer slammed, then another, as men who had no right to enter the house began listing the contents they intended to sell before sunset. Eleanor blotted the page, closed the brown account book, and carried it to the front hall. "You cannot inventory a property while the debt is disputed," she said. The bailiff looked past her as if the carved lintel had spoken. He was a broad man in a wet wool coat, with 2 assistants at his back, and Sir Oswald's clerk crouched over a portable desk near the umbrella stand. "I have a warrant, miss. You have a copy. The original was issued against a sum that includes interest charged twice and repairs never performed." The clerk's pen stopped. The bailiff's did not. He pointed toward the long case clock. "Mahogany. 8-day movement. My late father's." "Then he no longer requires it." Martha Vale caught Eleanor's wrist before she could answer. Her mother's hand was cold, though she had been standing beside the kitchen fire when the men arrived. Behind her, Catherine and Lucy waited on the lower stair, wearing the same frightened stillness they had worn at their father's funeral. Eleanor knew that stillness. It was the look of women who had been told that every important decision had already been made elsewhere. She drew her hand free, gently. "The interest calculation is false," she said. "You will wait while I place the dispute before the magistrate." The clerk gave a small, embarrassed cough. "The magistrate is dining with Sir Oswald at noon." "How convenient." "Eleanor," her mother whispered. Hoofbeats sounded beyond the gate. Not the hurried clatter of another creditor, but the measured approach of several good horses and a carriage built too heavily to fear the ruts. The bailiff's expression changed before Eleanor saw the crest on the door. A red wyvern above crossed keys. The Duke of Redwick had come to watch his trustee take their home. His Grace stepped down without waiting for the footman. Julian Ashcombe was taller than Eleanor remembered from the single county dinner at which she had seen him 3 years earlier. Then he had been the late Duke's second son, silent at the far end of a glittering table while his father laughed about coal as though men did not crawl underground to cut it. Now Julian wore black, not the soft black of fashion, but a severe coat that made the morning seem paler around him. Rain shone on his shoulders. His face held the controlled fatigue of a man who had forgotten that sleep was not a moral weakness. Sir Oswald Crewe emerged from the carriage after him, silver-haired and smiling. "Miss Vale," Crewe said with the tenderness of a physician announcing that pain would be brief. "I had hoped you would accept necessity with grace. You had hoped we would not examine your arithmetic." His smile thinned. The Duke looked from Eleanor to the open front door, the portable desk, and the bailiff's chalk marks on the hall furniture. His gaze rested for 1 second on Martha Vale and the 2 girls on the stairs. Something moved behind his composure, too quickly for Eleanor to name. "No property is to be removed," he said. Crewe turned. "Your Grace?" "Not until I have spoken with Miss Vale. The warrant has been lawfully obtained. Then it will remain lawful after half an hour." Julian did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The bailiff lowered his pencil. Eleanor should have been grateful. Gratitude was what men like Crewe expected when they delayed an injury they had arranged. Instead, she looked at the Duke and wondered what price he had brought inside his silence. He asked for the library. Their library had become her office after her father's death, though half the shelves were empty now. She led him there, refusing to notice Sir Oswald following until Julian stopped at the threshold. "I said, Miss Vale, I am your trustee, which is why I require a conversation you have not prepared for me." For the first time, Sir Oswald looked less than certain. He bowed and withdrew. Julian closed the door. Eleanor remained standing. "If you intend to offer charity, Your Grace, the answer is no." "I do not offer charity." "Then you have come to purchase the house before Sir Oswald sells it by pieces." "No. To purchase the northern field. It lies above the second coal seam." His eyes sharpened. "You know that?" "I surveyed it. Your father's map bears his signature." My father's hand shook after the fever. He could not hold a chain steady over broken ground. "I measured it. He signed it because no company in Yorkshire would accept a woman's survey." Julian glanced at the rolled plans in the corner, then at the brown account book beneath her hand. "That is why I am here." She almost laughed. "You brought a trustee, a bailiff, and 4 horses because you admire my measurements?" Crewe brought the bailiff. "I followed when I learned the address." "And what do you want?" The Duke reached inside his coat and placed a folded document on her desk. The seal was unbroken. The precision of the gesture made her uneasy. "Redwick is failing," he said. "Not the house, not the mines, not the estate. Redwick, as though the title itself were a wounded creature he had carried into the room. Eleanor did not touch the paper. Your annual rents exceed £20,000. On paper. Your coal contracts. On paper. The Eastern Iron Works? Mortgaged. She studied him more carefully. His cravat was immaculate. His boots were wet but recently polished. There was no visible crack in him, yet she heard one in every clipped answer. How much? Enough that 300 tenant families may lose their leases before Michaelmas. Enough that Crewe has advised me to sell the mineral rights beneath the northern farms. Her fingers tightened on the brown book. To whom? A consortium he represents. At what valuation? Julian named it. This time she did laugh. Once, without amusement. That is less than half the scene's conservative value. I know. Do you? His jaw changed. It was a small thing, but Eleanor had negotiated with men who believed anger made their errors more authoritative. She waited. Instead of rebuking her, he pushed the folded document closer. I need someone who can examine every lease, debt, transport charge and production account without reporting first to Crewe. You have written to my estate office 6 times in 14 months. Each letter identified a discrepancy my steward dismissed and my trustee explained away. Yesterday I found your 4th letter hidden in a file marked Social Petitions. I am touched by the efficiency of your household. I deserve that. The admission unsettled her more than anger would have. You can hire me, she said. If I hire you today, Crewe will have you accused of altering your family's debt to benefit yourself. He will also prevent you from seeing the trust accounts. My father's settlement gives the family trustee authority over any outside agent. Then dismiss him. The same settlement prevents dismissal without proof of fraud or the consent of my wife. Eleanor looked at the folded document again. The room seemed to narrow around it. You have no wife? No. And you have brought me... What? A petition for parliamentary reform? A marriage contract. Outside the library, something heavy scraped across the hall floor. Lucy cried out, and the sound was quickly smothered. Eleanor did not move. She kept her gaze on Julian because looking toward the door would let him see exactly where to place the knife. You propose marriage to gain a second signature. I propose a legal alliance. Your family's mortgage will be purchased from Crewe and settled on your mother for her lifetime. Your sisters will receive dowries and education funds. You will have authority to audit the Redwick estates. And in return, you will reside at Redwick. You will perform the audit. You will not disclose the estate's condition until we have prevented a general panic among the tenants and lenders. Anything else? The usual public duties. Smiling beside you while men decide whether I stole the position? If necessary. She broke the seal. The contract was 12 pages long. It had been prepared in haste by an excellent lawyer. That was clear from the elegant way its traps had been hidden. She read standing up. Julian waited. At the end of the 3rd page, she found the clause transferring control of any property she acquired during the marriage to the Duke. At the 5th, she found the provision allowing him to terminate her audit authority at his sole discretion. At the 7th, a confidentiality clause broad enough to prevent her from defending herself against any accusation connected to Redwick. Eleanor opened the desk drawer, took out her penknife, and cut the property clause from the page. Julian's brows rose. She cut out the audit provision next. Miss Vale. You said you needed my skill. I do. Then you do not need ownership of everything that skill may earn. She scored a line through the confidentiality clause and wrote in the margin, except where disclosure is required to prevent fraud, harm to tenants, or false accusation against either party. This contract was drafted to give me safety, she said, provided I never act without your permission, never own the result of my work, and never speak if your family blames me. That is not safety, if your family blames me. That is not safety. It is a prettier form of dependence. The clauses are standard. So are coffins. For one breath he looked almost offended. Then, unexpectedly, the corner of his mouth shifted. What do you require? My mother's home placed beyond your creditor's reach, not merely purchased in your name. Education funds for Catherine and Lucy administered by my mother. A separate income for me. Audit authority that cannot be withdrawn without a written finding of misconduct from 3 independent men. Men? The law is not yet imaginative enough to offer me independent women with standing. We shall use what exists. She turned another page. 3 months before either of us may seek annulment or separation, except for violence, coercion, or fraud. No sale of mineral rights during those 3 months. No dismissal of a tenant for arrears without review. And I see every account, including your private borrowing. His face closed at the last condition. There it was. Not simple pride, but fear. Eleanor recognized it because she had seen the same fear in her father when bills lay unopened under his breakfast plate. "Every account," she repeated. "That is unnecessary. Then marry someone decorative and lose your minds." The hammer struck the gate again. Julian's head turned toward the sound. When he looked back, his control had returned, but it no longer seemed effortless. "Agreed," he said. "In writing." He took the pen. They worked for 23 minutes. He questioned 2 phrases, rejected 1, accepted 6, and added a clause of his own stating that no member of the Vale family could be compelled to reside at Redwick. It was the first provision he proposed that did not increase his power. When they were done, Eleanor sanded both signatures. "The warrant," she said, "will be stayed. Before I leave this room." He opened the door and called for Sir Oswald. Crewe entered with the expression of a man prepared to forgive a child. It vanished when Julian handed him the amended contract. "You cannot be serious." "I have signed." Sir Oswald read the first page, then the final one. His gaze moved to Eleanor. "A wedding arranged under threat of debt may be misunderstood." "Then take care how you describe the threat," Eleanor said. His pale eyes cooled. "Your Grace, this young woman's family owes £11,000. 7,416, Eleanor said. "If one removes duplicate interest, false roof repairs, and a transport fee charged to coal that never crossed Vale land." An imaginative calculation. She opened the brown account book. "Would you like to dispute it before witnesses?" Crewe did not look at the figures. He looked at the book. Only for an instant, yet in that instant, Eleanor saw recognition. Not of her handwriting or her argument, of the book itself. Her father had found it in the locked drawer of an abandoned mine office 6 months before his death. Most of its pages contained ordinary wage and cartage records in faded brown ink. Several leaves had been cut out. A handful of entries, written in red, referred to payments no one in the Vale household understood. Sir Oswald knew what it was. The discovery was worth more than his answer. Julian signed the order staying the sale and gave it to the bailiff. Sir Oswald watched in silence as the chalk marks were wiped from the furniture, and the portable desk was folded away. By 9, the men had gone. By 10, the county would know Eleanor Vale had accepted the Duke of Redwick. By noon, half of Yorkshire would decide why. Martha waited until the carriage disappeared before she shut the front door. Then she leaned against it and covered her face. "Mama," Lucy whispered. Eleanor crossed the hall, but her mother lowered her hands before she reached her. "Tell me you did not sell yourself for this house." The question hurt because it had been asked with love. "I sold nothing," Eleanor said. "I made an agreement with a duke. He signs his name the same way other men do. Other men cannot make your life impossible with one word. Neither can he. Not now." She showed them the amended pages. Catherine read quickly, tracing the separate education fund with one finger. Lucy cared only that they would not leave the house. Martha read the clause protecting Eleanor's property twice. "Your father used to say contracts were only promises written by the person holding the better pen," she murmured. "Then it is fortunate I kept the pen." Her mother looked at her for a long moment. "And what happens when His Grace discovers he has married a woman who will never stop correcting his sums?" Eleanor closed the contract. "He loses less money." She meant it to sound practical. It did not explain why she remembered the brief movement at the corner of Julian's mouth, or why the fear in his face when she demanded his private accounts troubled her more than Sir Oswald's threat. That afternoon a special license was requested. Before evening, a jeweller's messenger arrived with 3 rings and a note in Julian's precise hand. "Choose whichever causes the least inconvenience." Eleanor sent all 3 back. Her reply contained a single sentence. "Bring a plain band, the Redwick trust deed, and the last 5 years of mine accounts." Julian brought the band. He did not bring the accounts. They were married 4 days later in the small church at Ainsley Cross, with rain ticking against the windows and no guests beyond their families, Mr. Reeve and Sir Oswald Crewe. Eleanor wore a grey wool dress because white would have made the event look like a dream, and she had no intention of entering a legal arrangement half asleep. The plain gold ring fit perfectly. She suspected Julian had asked the jeweller to measure one of her gloves. That was the kind of quiet trespass he might call efficiency. During the vows he spoke clearly and looked directly at her. He did not soften the words or pretend they meant more than the contract behind them. Eleanor appreciated the honesty until the minister pronounced them husband and wife, and she saw Julian's right hand close so tightly around his prayer book that the leather bent. Fear again. Not of her, she thought. Of the door he had just locked behind himself. Sir Oswald offered congratulations on the church steps. "Redwick will benefit from new energy," he said. "And new arithmetic," Eleanor replied. His smile remained, but his gaze moved to the reticule at her wrist. The red ledger was not there. She had left it with her mother beneath a loose board in the library floor. Julian's carriage carried them north through a landscape of winter fields, low stone walls, and villages smudged by coal smoke. For the first hour, neither spoke. Eleanor reviewed the questions she intended to ask. Julian read the same page of a parliamentary report without turning it. At last, he set it aside. You returned the rings. They were impractical. One was only a band. One was a chain disguised as a serpent eating its own tail. It was an Ouroboros. Then it was an educated chain. His mouth moved again. That almost smile he appeared determined not to own. The jeweler was offended. He will survive. You have begun your duties as Duchess with considerable compassion. I have not begun any duties as Duchess. I have begun an audit. The household will expect. The household may expect me to be civil. It may not expect me to arrange flowers while 300 families wait to learn whether their leases will be sold. He looked out at the fields. The families do not know. They know something. People always know when powerful men begin whispering. A run on credit would destroy us before we can prove anything. Secrecy may be necessary for a little while. Lying is not. You draw a convenient distinction, a necessary one. They passed a line of cottages at the edge of a colliery village. Children stood beside a frozen pump while a woman fought to free the handle. The roofs were patched. One chimney leaned away from the wind. Eleanor watched Julian watching them. When did you last visit the eastern pits? She asked. October. Which October? His eyes came back to hers. Last year. She waited. 2 years ago, he said. And your father? Never, if he could avoid it. Then your accounts are not the only things that have been prepared for you. Redwick Hall appeared at dusk, standing above a wooded valley like a dark ship run aground. The central house was older than the wings added by Julian's grandfather. 30 windows reflected the last grey light. Stone wyverns guarded the steps, their faces worn smooth by weather. The entrance hall was warm enough to make Eleanor dizzy after the carriage. Servants lined both sides beneath portraits of Ashcombe men who all seemed disappointed by the present generation. Mr. Reeve stepped forward. He was in his late 60s, slight and straight-backed, with white hair and the reserved expression of a man who had spent decades learning which truths a great house punished. Your Grace. Your Grace. The second greeting was for Eleanor. No hesitation, no visible curiosity. Mr. Reeve, she said, I am told you know where everything is. His gaze flickered toward Julian. I endeavour to, Your Grace. Then tomorrow you will show me the estate office. Julian removed his gloves. Lady Redwick has had a long journey. I can be tired in the office. Several servants looked rapidly at the floor. Mr. Reeve's expression did not change. At 9, Your Grace. 8. 8, Julian said before Reeve could answer. After breakfast. Eleanor turned to him. The office will not be less real if I enter it before eating. No, you will merely be less reasonable. You have known me 4 days. Your evidence is weak. I have read 6 of your letters. The housekeeper coughed into her hand. Eleanor suspected it concealed a laugh. She went to breakfast at 7:30. The estate office occupied 3 rooms in the oldest wing. The outer room held tenant ledgers and maps. The second contained mine accounts. The third door was locked. Private correspondence, Mr. Reeve said. Private borrowing, Eleanor guessed. Reeve looked toward Julian, who had joined them, despite claiming a meeting with his land agent. Julian took a key from his pocket. Both. He opened the door. Inside, shelves rose from floor to ceiling. Some were orderly. Others held bundles of notes tied with ribbon, bank letters, mortgage deeds and bills folded into the books where someone had hidden them after reading. A green leather box sat on the desk. Julian did not enter. Eleanor saw his father in the untouched dust, though she had never met the man properly. She saw a breakfast table where letters remained sealed because opening them admitted dependence. She saw shame arranged as privacy. I will need an inventory, she said. You will have it. No, I will make it. Mr. Reeve can witness. Why? Because if something is missing later, neither of us should have to rely upon trust we have not yet built. He accepted the rebuke without visible offense. Very well. For 6 days, Eleanor worked from 8 in the morning until the supper bell. She found chaos first, then patterns. Redwick's farms paid reasonable rents. The pits produced more coal than the sale accounts recorded. Transport charges had doubled in 4 years despite no corresponding increase in distance or tolls. Timber purchases were entered under repairs, then entered again under mine supports. 3 loans had been renewed at punitive rates 1 week before cheaper credit became available. Every damaging decision bore either Sir Oswald's authorization or the signature of a subordinate who answered to him. Yet nothing alone proved fraud. Trustees could be incompetent without being criminal. Prices changed. Wagons broke. Men made poor bargains. Eleanor asked to see the production books kept at the pits. "They are summarized here," Julian said. "A summary is an argument dressed as a fact. The roads are bad. Then we shall take a lighter carriage. The lower workings are not suitable for—" She placed her pencil down. "Finish that sentence carefully." He exhaled. "For anyone unfamiliar with them, better." They went the following morning. At East Redwick the mine captain met them in a clean coat that had never touched coal. He addressed every answer to Julian, even when Eleanor asked the question. "Daily output? 48 tons, Your Grace. Loss to poor quality? 7%, Your Grace. Average wagon load? 2.5 tons, Your Grace." Eleanor looked at Julian. "Does my voice resemble yours?" The mine captain blinked. Julian's expression remained grave. "Her Grace asked you." The next answer came to her. She spent 2 hours at the weighing shed. The official scale was correct, the tally board was not. Men carrying numbered brass tokens deposited them after each load. The clerk copied the count into a rough book, then transferred it into a clean weekly ledger. On 3 days out of 6, the weekly total was lower than the rough count. "Where are the discarded tokens?" Eleanor asked. The clerk pointed to a locked cabinet. Inside, she found more tokens than the recorded output required. She laid them in rows across the desk. Julian watched her count. "How much?" he asked. "Not yet." "An estimate?" "No." "You must have one." "I have suspicion." "You have spent years being given suspicion with a title stamped upon it and calling it certainty. I will give you a number when I can defend it." The mine captain's face whitened. Julian did not argue. That afternoon, Eleanor walked the northern field with a surveyor's chain, 2 rods, and a notebook while sleet gathered in her hair. Julian followed for the first half-mile, then took one end of the chain when the estate assistant slipped on the frozen ground. "You need not do that," she said. "Neither do you. It is my work. At present, it is also mine." He was clumsy at first. He pulled the chain too tight, shifted the line before she set the pin, and assumed the shortest path was the correct boundary. Eleanor corrected him without mercy. He accepted each correction with increasing amusement. By the 3rd measurement, they moved in rhythm. At the ridge above the pit, the land fell away toward a group of tenant farms. A thin stream crossed the valley and disappeared below a stone bridge. Eleanor compared the contour with her father's old plan. "The proposed sale boundary cuts through the water rights," she said. Julian came beside her. Their shoulders nearly touched. "Crew said the stream was seasonal. It feeds 3 mills and half the cottages below. Then the consortium would control the water, and could make the remaining land worthless without purchasing it." The wind tore at the map. Julian caught one edge, his gloved hand covering hers for a moment. He released it at once. "Can you prove it? Give me the old leases. You shall have them." It was the first time his answer contained no condition. On the return journey they stopped at a tenant farm where the roof had fallen above the dairy. The widow who lived there, Ruth Henshaw, curtsied so quickly she almost lost her balance. Julian asked why the repair had not been completed. "It was refused, Your Grace." "By whom?" "Mr. Crew's office." "On what grounds?" The widow looked at Eleanor before answering. "They said my son's arrears made us a poor risk." Her son had died in a roof collapse at the western pit. Julian went still. Eleanor had begun to recognize that stillness as the place where his anger fought his shame. "The repair will be made," he said. Ruth thanked him with tears in her eyes. Eleanor waited until they were outside. "You cannot promise from impulse what the estate cannot fund." His face hardened. "Would you have me leave her roof open?" "No. I would have you know whether 10 other roofs are open before you spend money on the one you happen to see. Compassion does not require a ledger. Responsible compassion does." He turned away, looking across the fields. "My father would have ridden past." The words were quiet. Eleanor softened, but not enough to lie. "Then do better than your father. Do not merely do the opposite." The next morning, Julian ordered an inspection of every tenant roof on the northern estate. He asked Eleanor to design the priority list. It was a small act. No ballad would be written about it. No one in London would praise him for replacing rotten beams before they fell. But Eleanor marked it carefully in the private account she was keeping of him. On the 8th day, she found the first direct link to Sir Oswald. The rough production books showed coal leaving East Redwick in wagons owned by Crew Transport. The estate paid full carriage fees. A second entry charged the same loads to a company called North Vale Haulage. A duplicate, Julian said. Repeated for 22 months. Then a clerk is stealing. Perhaps. She placed 3 invoices side by side. The signatures differed, but the paper bore the same faint watermark. A crown above the letters O.C. Oswald Crewe. Julian stared at it for so long that Eleanor heard the clock in the outer office strike twice. "This is enough to suspend him," she said. "Not enough to convict. Suspension gives us access to his records. It also tells him what we know. He already knows we are looking." Julian picked up the invoices and walked to the fire. Eleanor rose so quickly her chair struck the wall. "Do not." He stopped. "I was going to see the watermark against the light." She had thought he meant to burn them. The realization embarrassed her, but the speed of her fear angered her more. Julian lowered the papers. "What did your father do with bills he could not pay?" he asked. The question was too accurate. "He hid them. Mine burned them." The room changed. Julian looked at the invoices, not at her. He said paper had no power once it was ash. Creditors disagreed. Eleanor understood then why every private account had remained locked, why he preferred a command to a question, why terror appeared whenever figures became personal. He had inherited not only a ruined estate but a childhood in which money arrived as threat and shame. She moved closer, stopping beyond the reach of intimacy. "Paper has only the power of what it proves," she said. "These prove someone has been stealing from you. They do not prove you are your father. You cannot know that." "No, but I can keep accounts until we do." At last, he looked at her. The silence between them was not comfortable. It was better than comfort. It was honest. He handed her the invoices. "Put them somewhere I cannot burn them." She took them. "That is the first sensible order you have given me." It was a request. Even better. That evening, for the first time, Julian came to the estate office carrying 2 cups of tea instead of another locked box. He set one beside Eleanor without comment and took the chair opposite her desk. "Mrs. Henshaw's roof is not the only one," he said. "There are 14 urgent repairs and 23 that cannot wait beyond spring. The timber account can cover 6 if we stop paying Crewe's duplicate transport charges. And the others? Renegotiate the Western leases. The current contracts reward the lessee for removing the best coal quickly and leaving dangerous workings behind. A lower fixed rent with a production share would give the estate income now and reduce waste. The lessee will refuse. Then let him. 2 smaller operators have asked for access." "How do you know?" "They wrote to my father." "Why?" "Because he answered letters." Julian accepted the blow. He had begun doing that more often, not with meekness, but with the concentration of a man learning a language he had once dismissed as noise. They worked until midnight. At some point the fire sank low and the vast house around them became silent. Julian removed his coat. Eleanor loosened the cuffs that had begun to chafe her wrists. Nothing about the scene was improper, yet she felt the charged privacy of it. 2 people bent over the same problem, neither performing for a household or county. When she looked up, he was not reading the lease before him. "What?" she asked. "You count under your breath. Only when figures are badly arranged. You have been counting for 6 hours. Your father's clerks had an uncommon gift. For fraud? For placing totals in 3 different corners of a page." He laughed. The sound startled both of them. It was not the polite exhalation she had heard at dinner. It was brief and warm and young enough to reveal the man he might have been before Redwick became a burden he carried even while sleeping. Eleanor's answering smile arrived before caution. His gaze lowered to her mouth, then rose at once. "You should rest," he said. "So should you. I am not the one who nearly walked into a cabinet an hour ago." The cabinet was poorly placed. It has stood there since 1712. "Then the error has been neglected for a very long time." He walked her to the staircase. At the first landing, they stopped beneath a portrait of Julian's elder brother. Lord Stephen Ashcombe had Julian's height and none of his severity. The painter had given him a half-smile and one hand resting on a red-bound book. Eleanor looked more closely. "Is that a ledger?" Julian followed her gaze. "A betting book. According to my father." "Did your brother gamble?" "He was said to." "That was not my question." Julian's expression closed. "Good night, Eleanor." It was the first time he had used her name. He seemed to realize it only after the word had crossed the space between them. Then he bowed and walked away. The next letter from Sir Oswald arrived the following morning. It was addressed to the Duke but left open on the breakfast table, an apparent accident too deliberate to be one. Crewe expressed concern that Lady Redwick's enthusiasm had alarmed tenants and creditors. He advised Julian to end the pit inspections, approve the mineral sale, and allow his wife to devote herself to duties better suited to her new dignity. At the bottom he noted that Vale House remained secure only while the mortgage transfer proceeded without objection. Eleanor read it twice. "He has not transferred the mortgage," she said. Julian put down his coffee. "The funds left my bank." "That is not the same thing." He confirmed receipt. "He confirmed that you paid him. We need proof that the charge was released and the settlement recorded." Julian was silent. "You trusted him to complete it," she said. "He has served my family for 30 years. Then he has had 30 years to learn exactly which assurances you do not verify." They sent a messenger to the county registry. The answer came after dark. No release had been recorded. Vale House still belonged to Crewe's lending company. Julian's money had been applied, according to a note in another hand, against outstanding Redwick advisory expenses. Eleanor folded the registry letter with precise care. "My mother is still at his mercy. I will send another payment." She looked at him. "No," he corrected. "We will obtain an injunction and demand an account." The correction came quickly enough to matter. Not quickly enough to ease the cold in her chest. "He knew this would bring me here," she said. "He wanted me away from the house." "Why?" "The ledger." They left for Vale House before dawn. Snow began an hour into the journey. By the time they arrived, the garden wall had disappeared beneath white, and the bare trees stood like ink marks against the sky. Martha opened the door herself. Relief crossed her face when she saw Eleanor, followed by alarm at the Duke behind her. "What has happened? Where is Father's red book?" Her mother's eyes moved toward the library. The loose board had been lifted. The hollow beneath it was empty. Nothing else in the room had been disturbed. The silver inkstand remained on the desk. The rolled maps stood in their basket. Whoever entered had known where to look. Lucy appeared at the door. "A man came yesterday." Martha turned. "What man?" "He said he was from His Grace's office. He had a red seal." Julian's face hardened. "What did he look like?" Lucy described Sir Oswald's junior clerk. Eleanor gripped the edge of the desk. Her first instinct was to calculate loss. The missing red entries, the cut pages, the names she had not yet traced. Her second was to blame herself for leaving. Julian seemed to read the thought. "Crewe stole it," he said. "You did not give it to him. I put it beneath a floorboard in a house he owns. Because I failed to complete the settlement. Because you trusted him." "Yes." The answer, offered without defense, stopped her anger from taking the shape it wanted. Martha moved to the window. "There may be another copy." Eleanor turned. Her mother pressed both hands against the sill. "Your father copied figures at night. I thought they were his own debts. He made me promise not to ask. After he died, I found pages sewn into the lining of his old traveling coat." "Why did you not tell me?" "Because every number seemed to make you carry more. Because I was tired of watching paper eat my husband and then my daughter." Eleanor felt the words with more force than accusation. Martha went upstairs and returned with a folded packet. The paper inside was thin, covered in her father's unsteady hand. He had copied only the red entries, but beside several he had written initials and dates. S.A. Stephen Ashcombe. Julian sat down. The notes showed payments from the Northern Mines to 3 shell companies. Stephen had marked 2 as Crewe concerns. Beside the last entry, 3 weeks before his death, he had written, "OC says father approved. Father denies when sober." "How did Stephen die?" Eleanor asked. "A riding accident." "Was he drunk?" "That was the report." "Did you see him?" Julian's eyes did not leave the page. "Afterward." "Before the accident?" "That morning. He came to London and demanded I sign a petition to remove Crewe. He had no evidence with him. He was angry. I told him I would not help him disgrace our father because of gambling debts." The last words were scarcely audible. "He left?" "I gave him money." Eleanor understood. Julian had offered his brother money instead of belief, as he had offered her property protection instead of partnership. "The betting book in the portrait," she said, "may not have been a betting book." Martha placed a hand on Julian's shoulder. He flinched, then made himself remain still. "Grief makes us foolish in different directions," she said. "It made my husband hide. It made my daughter work until she forgot she was loved. Perhaps it made you obey the wrong man." Julian looked up at Eleanor. She wanted to tell him that Stephen's death was not his fault. She had no evidence for that. Comfort without truth was only another false account. "We can prove what your brother found," she said. "Then we can decide what forgiveness is possible." His gaze held hers. "We?" The word was almost a question. "For the audit," she said. It was not the whole answer, but it was what she could give. They returned to Redwick with the copied pages hidden inside the lining of Eleanor's traveling case. Julian insisted on riding beside the carriage rather than within it. At an inn where they changed horses, Eleanor found him in the stable yard, snow melting on his hair. "You will freeze," she said. "I have been colder." "That is a poor argument for continuing." He looked toward the horses. "Stephen asked me for help. I gave him enough money to make his supposed vice worse. You acted on what you believed. I chose what was easiest to believe." Eleanor came to stand beside him under the eaves. "My father asked me to stop opening his bills," she said. "He said the figures confused him. I knew they did not. I knew he was ashamed. I opened them in secret, negotiated with creditors in secret, sold my grandmother's brooch in secret, negotiated with creditors in secret, sold my grandmother's brooch in secret. I told myself I was protecting him. When he discovered it, he said I had made him a child in his own house. Were you wrong? I was right about the debt. I was wrong to decide that being right gave me ownership of his choices." Julian turned to her fully. Snow drifted beyond the stable roof. Somewhere inside, a groom whistled to a nervous horse. "Is that what I have done to you?" he asked. "Sometimes." The answer hurt him. She saw it and did not withdraw it. "Tell me when. You will dislike the frequency. Tell me anyway." It was not an apology, it was a door. Eleanor stepped through it. "You chose the first contract without asking what freedom meant to me. You tried to keep me from the pits. You assumed payment completed the mortgage because checking would have required admitting doubt. You offer solutions before you ask what the problem has cost someone else." He listened without interruption. "And you," he said when she finished, "assume that accepting help will erase the work you did before it arrived. You deny people the opportunity to stand beside you, then resent them for not knowing how." She drew a breath to object, then closed her mouth. "I dislike the frequency," she said. "So do I." For a moment they stood close enough that she could see a pale scar beneath his jaw, close enough that his hand lifted as though he meant to touch her face. He stopped before contact. "May I?" The question mattered more than the touch. Eleanor nodded. His gloved fingers brushed a wet strand of hair from her cheek. Nothing more, yet warmth followed the path of them long after he lowered his hand. At Redwick, Sir Oswald was waiting. He had arrived with 2 bankers, a solicitor, and an expression of grave concern. The great drawing-room had been arranged as though for a polite execution. "Your Grace," he said, "rumour has reached London that Lady Redwick is interfering with secured contracts and encouraging tenants to withhold payment. Creditors require reassurance." Eleanor removed her gloves. "Which tenant has withheld payment?" Crewe did not answer her. "The consortium has withdrawn its original offer. If the mineral sale is not signed by Friday, it will be reduced by a quarter. Then we lose nothing worth having," Julian said. One banker shifted. "Your Grace, the notes due next month will be met." Eleanor looked at him. Their review had not yet found enough money to meet them all. Crewe saw the glance. "This is precisely the difficulty," he said softly. "A private gentleman's financial affairs have become subject to domestic influence. Lady Redwick's family benefits directly from your Grace's decisions." "My family has not yet received the settlement he paid you to complete," Eleanor said. The solicitor looked up. Crewe's face remained composed. "A registry delay. Your clerk removed a ledger from Vale House yesterday. An extraordinary accusation. Then you will not object to our searching his office." "Without a warrant?" "Without your cooperation," she said. Crewe turned to Julian. "You see the danger. She places you against the men whose confidence sustains Redwick. End this audit, sign the sale. I will personally guarantee Vale House and provide Lady Redwick with an allowance suitable to her rank." It was an elegant offer. Julian could keep the house, the title, and the appearance of solvency. Eleanor could keep her family home, provided she became silent. Every eye in the room rested on him. His hand tightened behind his back. "No," he said. Crewe's expression changed by less than a breath. Julian continued. "The sale is suspended. The mortgage settlement will be recorded by tomorrow. Lady Redwick's audit authority remains." "Then I must protect the trust," Crewe said. "A county meeting will be called to examine whether estate assets have been diverted under improper influence." "Call it." Crewe bowed. After the men left, Julian remained at the window. "You cannot meet all the notes," Eleanor said. "Not yet." "Why did you promise?" "Because if they smell fear, they will demand immediate payment." "So you lied." "I bought us time. With my credibility in the room. They watched me look at you." He turned. "Would you have preferred I announce insolvency?" I would have preferred you tell me before I helped confirm a falsehood. There was no opportunity. There is always an opportunity to say, my wife and I require a moment. And display division? We are divided when you make a decision for both of us. The first real quarrel of their marriage filled the drawing room without either raising a voice. Julian argued necessity. Eleanor argued consent. He said leadership sometimes required a decision before agreement. She said that principle had been the favorite tool of every man who had ever taken a woman's property for her own good. At last he said, I will not apologize for preventing panic. Then do not, but do not ask me to call it partnership. She returned to the estate office alone. For 2 days they spoke only about figures. The distance hurt more than Eleanor expected. She told herself this was useful information, not longing. She worked later, ate at her desk, and discovered 3 ways to meet the notes without the mineral sale. Early renewal premiums on restructured leases, sale of unused London property, and a short bridge loan secured by future coal output rather than tenant land. Julian approved the first 2. On the third, he asked before sending the letter. It was not an apology, it was evidence of one forming. On Thursday, Mr. Reeve came to Eleanor after midnight. He closed the office door and placed a small iron key on her desk. Lord Stephen gave me this the week before he died. What does it open? A box in the old estate chapel. Why have you waited? The old man's face seemed to age further. His late Grace dismissed 2 servants who supported Lord Stephen. Sir Oswald told me my granddaughter's tenancy would be reviewed if I repeated his accusations. I told myself silence kept her safe. And now? Now Sir Oswald has called a meeting to destroy you in public. Silence has become a choice I can no longer mistake for safety. Julian stood in the doorway. Neither Eleanor nor Reeve had heard him approach. The old man went white. Your Grace. Julian looked at the key, then at the servant who had known his family since he was a boy. Your granddaughter's tenancy will not depend on what you tell me, he said, nor on whether it pleases me. Reeve's shoulders lowered by a fraction. Thank you, Your Grace. Julian entered and closed the door. Eleanor, before we go to the chapel, I owe you an apology. Reeve began to withdraw. Stay, Julian said. I made the error before a witness. I may correct it before one. He faced Eleanor. I used your presence to support a promise I had not discussed with you. I called it necessity because that allowed me to ignore the cost to you. I was wrong. No grand language, no request that she comfort him for having understood. Eleanor felt some locked part of herself ease. Thank you, she said. Will you come to the chapel? He asked. She took the key. Yes. The old chapel had not been used since Julian's mother died. Ivy pressed against the stained glass, turning moonlight green. Dust lay thick across the pews, except where mice had crossed it in delicate lines. Mr. Reeve led them behind the altar to a narrow stair. At the bottom stood a vestry cupboard blackened by age. The key opened a compartment beneath the lowest shelf. Inside was a red leather box. Julian did not reach for it. You open it, he said to Eleanor. The box contained Stephen's private account book, 3 letters from Crewe, and a packet of receipts. The account book was bound in the same red leather as the one stolen from Vale House. When Eleanor placed her father's copied entries beside Stephen's, the missing structure appeared. The brown ink recorded legitimate coal sales. The red ink recorded the difference between what the estate produced and what Crewe reported. Stephen had followed the money through transport companies, advisory fees and loans. Crewe had used Redwick's own stolen income to lend money back to the estate at ruinous interest. When Stephen confronted him, Crewe produced gambling notes bearing Stephen's signature and persuaded the old Duke that his son had invented accusations to cover his debts. One receipt proved the notes were purchased from a London forger. Another showed a payment to the ostler who had prepared Stephen's horse on the day he died. Julian sat on the chapel step, the papers in his hands. This does not prove murder, Eleanor said carefully. No. It proves Crewe feared what Stephen knew. It proves the gambling debts were false. We should not claim more than the evidence can carry. Julian closed his eyes. You are protecting Crewe from an accusation? I am protecting your brother's truth from being weakened by one we cannot prove. He looked at her then, grief stripped of anger. Stephen would have liked you. He sounds inconvenient. He was intolerable. Then perhaps we would have managed. Julian laughed once, but the sound broke. Eleanor sat beside him. She did not tell him to forgive himself. She did not say his brother would have understood. She let their shoulders touch in the cold chapel, while he held the evidence of a dead man's courage. After a long time, his hand turned palm upward between them. Eleanor placed hers in it. They returned to the house near dawn. Before they could secure the papers, a footman brought a message from the county clerk. The meeting had been moved forward. It would begin at 10 that morning. Sir Oswald had spent the night ensuring they would arrive tired and unprepared. The county assembly room occupied the upper floor of the old market hall. By the time Eleanor and Julian entered, landowners, magistrates, bankers, mine lessees and tenant representatives filled every bench. News of a duchess accused of stealing from her husband had achieved what questions about mine wages never could: perfect attendance. Crewe stood beside a table covered with documents. "Your Graces," he said. "How fortunate." Eleanor saw the trap at once. On the table lay transfer orders bearing her signature. The chairman, Sir Matthew Goring, cleared his throat. "This inquiry concerns allegations that Lady Redwick directed estate funds toward the discharge of her family's debts and interfered with trust property for personal advantage." Murmurs moved through the room. Julian stepped forward. Eleanor touched his sleeve. "Not yet." His instinct was to shield. His growth was measured in the fact that he stopped. Crewe presented the forged transfers. They appeared to move £3,000 from mine maintenance to Vale House. The signature was excellent. The dates matched days Eleanor had used the estate office. "Lady Redwick," the chairman said, "do you deny signing these?" "I do." "Can you prove the signature false?" "Yes, but first I ask that the corresponding bank drafts be produced." Crewe smiled. "The bank has confirmed them. It has confirmed drafts with those numbers. It has not confirmed those papers." She requested a magnifying lens from a clerk and held one transfer toward the window. "The estate stationery used in December bears a laid watermark running vertically. This sheet bears the new horizontal watermark ordered in February. The document is dated January." The chairman examined it. Crewe's solicitor rose. "Paper may remain in a drawer for years." "Indeed. Which is why we examine ink." Eleanor placed beside it a genuine order signed the same week. Her signature on the genuine order crossed a sanded patch because the office used coarse sand. The forgery showed fine black pounds used in Sir Oswald's London rooms. "Circumstantial," Crewe said. "Then let us follow the money." She had spent the carriage journey calculating what he expected her to defend. Now she refused the battlefield he had chosen. £3,000 left the mine maintenance account, she said. But it did not purchase Vale House. Sir Oswald's own note applied the Duke's payment to advisory expenses. The funds instead passed through North Vale haulage and returned as interest on a Redwick loan. She laid out the duplicate invoices and Stephen's receipts. Crewe's calm cracked. "Those documents are stolen family papers." "Then you acknowledge them?" Silence. The room shifted. Not yet belief, but attention. Crewe recovered quickly. "Lady Redwick has had unrestricted access to the estate office. She could manufacture any sequence she pleased. Her marriage was contracted while her family faced eviction. Are we expected to believe she entered it for love of accuracy?" Laughter came from somewhere near the back. He turned toward the sound, encouraged. "A woman of obscure birth becomes a duchess, gains control of trust papers, places her mother's house beyond creditors, and now asks us to call ambition a public service." Eleanor had known the accusation was coming. Knowledge did not make it painless. She saw Catherine and Lucy on the staircase at Vale House. She heard the bailiff describing their father's clock. She felt every stair measuring the distance between an indebted surveyor's daughter and a duke. Crewe lifted one forged transfer. If Lady Redwick's talents are as extraordinary as His Grace now claims, perhaps her first achievement was recognizing how easily a desperate man might be managed. Julian rose. This time Eleanor did not stop him. "You are correct about one thing," he said. "I was desperate." The room became still. "Redwick is burdened by debts I concealed because I believed disclosure would make me weak. I allowed Sir Oswald Crewe to direct the estate because questioning him required me to admit that I did not understand what I had inherited. Lady Redwick discovered the condition of the mines, the false transport charges, and the neglected tenant repairs because she possessed the skill I lacked and the courage I had mistaken for insolence." Crewe's solicitor whispered urgently to his client. Julian continued. "She did not steal authority from me. I withheld it until necessity forced me to recognize her judgment. I then used her credibility without her consent before my creditors. That was my error, not hers." Eleanor's throat tightened. He placed the trust deed on the chairman's table. "I waive the trust's claim to private resolution. I submit every Redwick account for public audit. I also surrender sole control of the mineral sale. No transfer will occur without review by an independent committee, including elected tenant representatives and Lady Redwick as professional auditor." The chairman stared. Your Grace, that may expose the estate to considerable liability. It should. The word struck harder than a declaration of love could have done. Julian was not rescuing her by making himself grand. He was removing the protection that had allowed his family's power to hide its failures. Then he sat down. He left the room to her. Eleanor rose. His Grace's admission does not prove my figures, she said. A title cannot turn an assertion into fact. These can. She called Mr. Reeve. The old man described Stephen's key and the chapel box. Martha presented her husband's copied entries. The East Redwick clerk, promised protection from dismissal, admitted that Sir Oswald's office had ordered him to alter weekly totals. 2 tenant farmers confirmed water rights omitted from the proposed sale. Eleanor built the case as she would build a boundary. Fixed point by fixed point, each measurement visible, each claim capable of repetition by another hand. At last she placed the red account books side by side. This is not a tale of a clever woman saving a foolish duke, she said. Nor is it proof that every landlord is wicked and every tenant honest. It is proof of what occurs when knowledge is kept behind rank. When those who bear the cost are denied the accounts, when those who bear the cost are denied the accounts, and when trust is demanded without inspection. She looked toward the tenant benches. The mines can meet their obligations. They can repair the cottages. They can remain productive without surrendering the water and fields that sustain the villages, but only if those who work and live there are permitted to see the terms under which their future is sold. Crewe stood abruptly. This meeting has no authority to try me. No, Eleanor said. But the magistrate has authority to examine forged transfers. The banks have authority to recover fraudulent charges, and the Duke has authority to suspend his trustee upon the evidence you just acknowledged. 2 constables waited at the door. Julian had summoned them, but he did not gesture theatrically. He simply handed the chairman Stephen's receipt from the forger. Sir Oswald's composure finally abandoned him. Your father approved every arrangement, he said to Julian. He knew what Redwick required. You will ruin your own name for a woman who will never understand what it costs to preserve one. Julian glanced at Eleanor. She understands the cost, he said. That is why she refuses to send the bill to someone else. Crewe was taken to a private room pending the magistrate's arrival. His solicitor followed, pale and furious. The meeting did not end in cheers. Reality was less obliging than theatre. Bankers demanded schedules. Lessees argued over terms. Landowners objected to tenant representation. For 3 hours Eleanor answered questions until her voice roughened. Julian brought her water and did not interrupt. By late afternoon the Assembly approved a provisional audit committee. The mineral sale was barred for 90 days. Vale House's mortgage release would be registered under court supervision. The fraudulent advisory expenses were frozen. Outside, rain had begun. People crowded beneath the market awning, discussing scandal with the pleasure of those who had not paid for it. Eleanor stood at the top of the steps. Julian came beside her. The carriage is ready, he said. I am not returning to Redwick tonight. He went very still. Because of the meeting? Because of what happened before it? Pain moved across his face, but he did not hide it behind command. I apologized. You did, and today you did more than apologize. But I do not know whether I can learn who I am beside you while living in your house, using your staff, and waiting to see if every disagreement becomes another decision made for me. He looked out at the rain. Where will you go? Vale House, then Leeds. A widow who owns 3 farms has asked me to examine her leases. I intend to accept. As Lady Redwick? As Eleanor Vale, unless the law insists upon adding your name. He absorbed that too. Are you ending the marriage? I am using the 3 months we wrote into the contract. The clause he had signed because she demanded it now stood between them as protection for them both. What do you require of me? He asked. Do not follow me tonight. Every line of him wanted to refuse. Very well. Do not send men to watch the house. His jaw tightened. Very well. Continue the committee without making me its ornament. Send papers for my review. Accept when I disagree. I can do that. Learn whether you can do it when you are afraid. She descended the steps alone. For the first month Julian kept every condition. Documents arrived at Vale House by ordinary messenger, not liveried footman. Each included a note stating what decision was required and what deadline applied. When Eleanor rejected the proposed Western lease, Julian sent questions instead of an order. When she recommended that the estate sell its unused London house, he did so despite his aunt's outrage. The roof inspections became a permanent repair schedule. The widow Ruth Henshaw joined the tenant committee. Mr. Reeve testified before the magistrate and retained his position. Crewe's scheme began to unravel across 3 counties. Eleanor took the lead's commission. She travelled, measured, negotiated, and earned money that arrived in an account under her control. Her mother complained that she worked too much and smiled while doing it. Julian did not ask her to come home. He asked her to attend the committee's final meeting as its appointed auditor. She returned to Redwick in March. The valley had begun to green. Scaffolding stood against cottage roofs. At East Redwick, the tally board had been replaced by a system in which 2 workers signed every weekly total. Julian met her in the entrance hall. He looked thinner and less guarded. Not healed. People were not accounts to be balanced once and closed. But the house around him no longer seemed to hold its breath. "Your rooms are as you left them," he said. "You may use them or not." "Thank you. The committee meets tomorrow. Tonight there is only dinner." "Only? My aunt will be present. Then I shall bring protective equipment." The almost smile appeared, no longer rare. After dinner he asked if she would walk with him. They went to the old chapel. The red ledgers now rested in a glass-fronted cabinet with copies available in the estate office. Stephen's portrait had been moved from the staircase to the library. Beneath it, a small brass plate recorded that he had first identified the fraud that threatened Redwick. "You gave him back his name," Eleanor said. "You did." "We did." Julian looked at her. The single word was an offering. This time she did not take it back. "The court has approved Crew's removal," he said. "The recovered funds will cover the urgent repairs and half the short-term notes. The new leases cover the rest." "I read the report." "Of course." He drew a folded document from his coat but did not hand it to her. "I have had the marriage settlement revised. Vale House belongs to your mother for life and then to your sisters jointly. Your professional earnings and any property purchased with them remain yours. The audit office is established as an independent firm, not an appointment I can withdraw." "Who owns the firm?" "You do." "Who selected its other partners?" "No one." "I thought you might prefer to do that." She took the document. At the bottom he had left a blank line beneath the proposed name. Vale Estate and Accounts Office. "There should be room for another name," she said. "A partner?" "Eventually." Hope crossed his face so openly that she had to look down at the page. "There is one matter the document cannot settle," he said. "That is usually where documents become dangerous. I love you." No flourish. No kneeling claim. The words stood without defense. Eleanor's heart moved painfully. "When did you decide?" "I did not decide. I noticed it at inconvenient intervals. In the snow when you told me I used solutions to avoid listening. In the assembly when you refused to let my confession replace your proof. At Redwick when every room became quieter after you left. Quiet can be restful. This was not." He came no closer. "I do not ask you to return because I have changed enough to deserve you. I ask whether I may continue changing where you can see it. If the answer is no, the settlement remains. The office remains. Your family's home remains. Nothing I have repaired is payment for your affection." Eleanor had imagined, in weaker moments, that being loved by a powerful man would feel like shelter. It did not. It felt like standing in clear weather after years of fog, and discovering she still had to choose the road. "I love you too," she said. "That does not mean I will stop correcting your sums." His breath left him in something between laughter and relief. "I had not hoped for a miracle, and I will not live at Redwick every month of the year. My office will take clients beyond your estate." "Agreed. You may disagree before agreeing. I am learning when resistance is futile." "That is not the lesson." "Then you will have to remain and teach me." She raised an eyebrow. He corrected himself. "Will you?" Eleanor folded the settlement and placed it on the chapel bench. Then she crossed the space between them. Their first kiss was neither desperate nor perfect. Julian hesitated until she touched his face. Eleanor felt the restraint in him, the question held even after permission, and answered by drawing him closer. When they parted, his forehead rested against hers. "You asked," she whispered. "I intend to make a habit of it." By summer, the new office occupied 3 rooms above a solicitor's practice in Leeds. Eleanor hired a widowed bookkeeper, a young woman trained in surveying by her father, and a clerk who had left Crew's company after agreeing to testify. The Redwick Committee met quarterly. Tenant representatives received the same accounts as landowners. Repairs were published beside production figures. Profits did not become virtue merely because they were recorded, but secrecy could no longer pretend to be stewardship. Julian divided his time between Redwick and Leeds. He still issued commands when frightened. Eleanor still attempted to solve pain as if it were a column of debt. They became skilled at stopping, naming the error, and beginning again. Martha Vale planted roses along the gate where the bailiff's hammer had once struck. Catherine began her studies in York. Lucy declared that she would never marry a duke because they required too much supervision. One evening in early autumn, Eleanor returned to the Redwick estate office after a week away. The old private room stood open. Its shelves were ordered, but not hidden. On the central desk lay a new ledger bound in red leather. She opened it. The first pages contained mine income, repair costs, lease premiums, and committee decisions. Every entry had space for 2 signatures. At the bottom of the final completed page, Julian had written a note. Question before deciding. Eleanor smiled and added beneath it, verify before trusting. Julian entered carrying 2 cups of tea. Is that a criticism? He asked. A governing principle. He set 1 cup beside her and looked at the open page. There is room for another. Together, they signed their names.